Between twin twilight whispers and unseen echoes.
Meeting Sarah. The towering gates of the royal enclave sealed behind the steward with a resounding thud, a sound that echoed in the empty corridors of the palace. Inside, the twins sat waiting, the soft light of the grand chamber casting strange shadows across the room's polished marble floors. They had been expecting her, the girl, though no one had made it clear how or why she appeared at Valley. That was not a place for ordinary people. A knock echoed from the door, breaking the tense silence.
"You may enter."
One of the twins called out, her voice calm yet carrying an air of quiet authority. The door creaked open, and the steward entered, leading a young girl by the hand. Sarah. The twins glanced at each other briefly, a subtle exchange passing between them. Neither spoke, but both felt it. This moment had been anticipated, perhaps even engineered. Still, neither twin acknowledged this openly, their faces betraying nothing.
The steward cleared his throat. "Your Highnesses, as requested, Sarah has been brought from Valley. Mr. Tabasco Jacobs was the one who found her in the Iron Guard's stronghold, locked in a tiny room with no food or water anywhere in sight. The unimaginable trauma she suffered at the barbarians' hands must be tremendous."
The girl, no more than 8 years old, stood silently beside him, her small hand clutching the edge of his coat. Her wide, confused eyes darted around the room, pausing for only a moment to study the eerily similar, but not at all identical figures of the twins seated on their thrones.
"Thank you, steward,"
Daniel said, her voice as smooth as glass.
"You may leave her with us now."
The steward hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowing. She seems to have no memory of how she arrived there, my lady. There's something strange about it."
The twins nodded in unison, their attention now focused solely on the girl.
That will be all.
They said together, their voices perfectly synchronized. The steward bowed quickly and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. Silence reigned once more. The twins sat still, their gazes locked on Sarah, studying her every movement. She looked back at them, her small frame dwarfed by the grandeur of the palace. There was something about her, it stirred in the twins' hearts. It was something deeper, more troubling. Finally Dune stood. Her delicate steps echoed through the hall as she approached Sarah. Kneeling, she met the girl's gaze directly, her dark eyes soft but searching.
"Do you remember how you got to Valley, Sarah?"
She asked gently, her voice now warm, maternal even. Daniel remained seated, watching silently from the shadows, her sharp mind working through the possible answers before the girl could speak.
Sarah shook her head, her expression blank. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't remember anything before that man found me."
The standing twin tilted her head slightly, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. She glanced back at her sister, exchanging another silent message. The girl was telling the truth, at least as much of it as she knew. Yet, something was missing.
"Did anyone speak to you?" The seated twin asked, her tone casual but probing. "Did anyone tell you where to go, where to find us?"
Again, Sarah shook her head. "No, I just woke up there."
The standing twin exhaled softly, nodding in understanding. "It's okay, you're safe now."
She rose to her full height, smoothing her dress with a flick of her fingers.
"We'll take care of you, Sarah."
There was a moment of stillness. The twins exchanged a glance, more deliberate this time. It was a silent acknowledgement of a truth they already understood. Sarah's presence here wasn't an accident, and the fact that she had been found at Valley of all places was no coincidence. But Sarah didn't need to know that. Not yet.
"Come with us. You must be tired."
Without another word, the twins led Sarah from the chamber, their steps echoing in unison through the vast halls of the palace. The girl followed, her small figure dwarfed by the looming arches and intricate tapestries that adorned the walls. Though her mind was clouded with confusion, there was an inexplicable pull she felt toward the twins, a sense of connection she could neither understand nor explain. But the twins felt it too. In the privacy of their chambers, the twins stood by the window, watching as Sarah was led to the room prepared for her. Once the door clicked shut behind her, the tension that had been simmering between them finally broke.
She has no memory of the transfer,
one of them said quietly, turning to her sister.
It's as we expected.
Yes, the other agreed, her voice low. But we knew it would come to this. She's tied to the echo in ways we don't yet understand. Her presence here is, however, necessary.
In that moment, the steward knocked vigorously on the door. It is the Odin password. The Odin thing has been used. They are calling it urgent. So sorry to interrupt like this, but the OCC is calling.
Chapter 20. The Oath Unfulfilled. Jack Harper leaned over the side railing of the airship, his eyes tracing the vivid, otherworldly terrain below. The scenery had shifted dramatically over the past hour. Where there had once been sprawling forests of towering silver trees and shimmering lakes, the landscape now resembled something from an ancient forgotten age. Below them, rivers of molten orange water snaked across the ground, carving paths through fields of obsidian sand. Charcoal-colored dunes streaked with soot like dust rose in the distance, while forests of orange-leafed trees stood defiantly against the harsh winds. The air shimmered with heat, casting mirages that danced and flickered like fleeting memories. This place. It doesn't look anything like the maps, Jack muttered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Darlow, standing just a few feet away, said nothing, his eyes fixed ahead, expression unreadable. Jack had noticed that Darlow had grown quieter the closer they got to their destination. Something weighed heavily on the man, but Jack couldn't put his finger on it. It felt as though every step they took drew them deeper into a web of secrets Jack wasn't privy to. He had assumed, naively perhaps, that their journey was to the Royal Enclave, where he would finally confront whoever had taken his daughter. But now there was something more in the air, something elusive. Jack had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and they were screaming at him that something was off. The ship hovered lower, its engines now a dull hum as the landscape below shifted once more. Massive shadows moved across the plains. At first Jack thought they were dark clouds, but as the ship dipped further, he saw them colossal creatures, their spiked, angular backs glistening under the dim light of the overcast sky. They lumbered across the ground in slow, deliberate motions, like prehistoric beasts plucked from the depths of Earth's forgotten past. Have you seen them before? Jack asked, motioning toward the hulking creatures below.
Darlow glanced briefly at them, his lips tight. They're remnants. Leftovers from a time before the echo split from what you know.
Jack's brow furrowed. Remnants of what?
War, Darlow answered. A war long forgotten, but one that never truly ended.
Before Jack could press further, the ship began to slow, and the captain's voice crackled through the intercom.
We'll be arriving shortly, gentlemen. We can't land. You'll have to descend manually.
Jack's stomach tightened at the captain's words. Descend manually.
Darlow smirked. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds.
Moments later, the hatch opened, and a cold gust of wind blasted through the cabin. Below them was a sprawling encampment. Thousands of figures moved in disciplined formations, their armor gleaming under the low-hanging clouds. The Iron Guard. Jack's heart sank. This wasn't the Royal Enclave. This was something else entirely. He grabbed Darlow's arm, pulling him aside. What the hell is this? I thought we were going to the Enclave to get my daughter.
Darlow shook his head, his eyes dark. We're meeting someone first.
Who? Jack demanded.
Darlow's jaw clenched. Bismarck.
Jack felt a chill run down his spine at the name. Bismarck. The man behind the Iron Guard. A ruthless leader who had made an impression on Jack. A much more complicated figure for Jack's liking.
Darlow reached for the rope ladder and tossed it over the side. We're not here for Sarah, not yet. Bismarck has something we need, something you need if you're ever going to see your daughter again. He has connections, resources, and most importantly, we're expecting something.
What kind of something? Jack's patience was wearing thin. He had been dragged along too many times without knowing the full story. He needed answers.
Darlow turned to face Jack fully, his expression serious. It's an oath, Jack. An oath made long ago by Bismarck's brother. A promise that has yet to be fulfilled.
Jack frowned. I don't understand. What does any of this have to do with Sarah?
Darlow sighed, glancing down at the encampment below. It has everything to do with her. Whoever took Sarah, they won't give her up without something in return. We need leverage, something they can't refuse.
Jack stepped back, running a hand through his hair. His thoughts raced. The Iron Guard, Bismarck. An unfulfilled oath. He had no idea how all of this fit together, but one thing was clear: this was much bigger than he had anticipated. And this oath, what is it? Jack asked.
Darlow's eyes flickered briefly, the first sign of uncertainty Jack had seen in him. It's not for me to say, but know this: Bismarck's brother made a vow to deliver something valuable beyond measure. It's what we're here to collect.
Jack's mind reeled. He thought back to all the stories he had heard about Bismarck and the wars waged within the Echo. Bismarck's brother, a figure shrouded in mystery, had remained a distant figure. Now it seemed he was the key to something far greater than Jack could have imagined. Before Jack could respond, Darlow stepped onto the ladder and began descending into the encampment below. Jack hesitated for a moment, looking down at the sea of soldiers beneath them. The Iron Guard, thousands of them, their banners flying in the wind, their armor gleaming like polished stone. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Taking a deep breath, Jack grabbed the ladder and began to descend. The wind whipped at his clothes as he climbed down, the vast scale of the Iron Guard camp becoming more apparent with each rung. As he neared the bottom, Jack could see the sheer number of troops, legions of soldiers standing in perfect formations, weapons glinting in the dim light. The ground trembled beneath their synchronized steps, and the air buzzed with the tension of a force preparing for something massive. As his boots hit the ground, Jack was immediately met by an imposing figure, a soldier clad in the black and crimson armor of the Iron Guard. His helmet obscured his face, but his voice was clear and commanding.
Follow me.
Darlow nodded at Jack to follow, and together they were led through the maze of soldiers and tents, deeper into the heart of the camp. The atmosphere was tense, charged with an unspoken anticipation. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. Eventually, they arrived at a large pavilion near the center of the encampment. Inside, standing at a large war table, surrounded by his advisors, was Bismarck himself. He was just as Jack had remembered, broad-shouldered, with an air of authority that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. His eyes were cold and calculating, the eyes of a man who had seen too much war and too little peace.
Jack Harper, Bismarck said, his voice a deep rumble. I've heard you were looking for a way in.
Jack tensed, unsure how to respond.
Darlow stepped forward, speaking for him. We've come for the item. Has your brother delivered on his promise?
Bismarck's gaze shifted from Jack to Darlow, his expression unreadable. Soon. When most others ran back to the Echo after the second hit, the one on Nagasaki, he stayed. When he learned about my fate, he vowed that the throne will be restored. I have no reason to doubt it.
Darlow stiffened but said nothing.
Bismarck continued, the item will be delivered as promised, but first we must ensure the preparations are in place. My brother, he looked directly at Jack now, his eyes piercing, made a vow, and he will honor it. You'll have what you need to bargain for your daughter's freedom, but not yet.
Jack's heart pounded in his chest.
Darlow stepped back, nodding to Jack. We wait, he said simply.
Jack clenched his fists. He hated waiting. But for now, there was nothing else he could do. Somewhere in the depths of this encampment, forces were at work that he couldn't yet comprehend. Forces that would soon collide in a way he couldn't predict. And at the heart of it all was a promise and oath yet to be fulfilled. It might be a phantom of hope, but he held on to it.
Chapter 21, Into the Mountain. The tarred road wound up the rugged slope, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the dense forest surrounding Cheyenne Mountain. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly, their branches brushing against the sleek military vehicle as Ghost, Emily, and Stefan approached the entrance to the long, hidden Cheyenne Mountain complex. The once top-secret bunker had long been converted into the Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, but its reputation for secrecy and impenetrability remained. As they neared the facility, two soldiers stood at attention, saluting sharply, their faces stoic beneath the brim of their caps. The tension was palpable, though unspoken. The soldiers knew who Ghost was, or at least knew enough not to ask questions. Ghost barely acknowledged them, his eyes fixed ahead, while Emily and Stefan exchanged glances. They had expected obstacles, but the way they were being ushered in without question was unnerving. A figure emerged from the reinforced door, a tall, sharply dressed officer with a crisp salute.
Afternoon, sir. I am Major Dawson. You must be the key holder. You and your team are expected. Please follow me.
They were led through the entrance, a heavy steel door that slammed shut with a weighty finality, sealing them within the bowels of the mountain. The hallway stretched before them, dimly lit, echoing with their footsteps. It felt like descending into another world, the air growing cooler as they moved deeper into the complex. Major Dawson moved with intention, her boots squeaking against the polished floor. Stefan studied the facility. This was no ordinary military base. The corridors were eerily quiet, the personnel few and far between, but those they did see kept their distance. It was clear that Ghost's presence commanded respect, if not fear. They soon arrived at the central elevator, a reinforced steel capsule large enough to accommodate a dozen people. The doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and they stepped inside, descending deeper into the mountain's core. As they descended, Emily broke the silence. "What exactly is down there?" Ghost remained silent, his expression stern. Stefan shot a glance but said nothing. He had learned by now that asking Ghost for answers often yielded none. The elevator stopped with a faint chime, and the doors opened to reveal the Nexus Room, a cavernous space, stark and cold, with terminals arranged in concentric hexagonal rows around the center, where the void beckoned. Emily took a breath. She had seen this place before, but the sheer scale of it never ceased to unsettle her. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the machinery. There was an air of anticipation, as if something far greater than them all was about to unfold.
Major Dawson moved toward the center. Keyholder, if you would accompany me to the SCEF. We have preparations to make.
Ghost nodded. Emily, Stefan, stay here.
Emily raised an eyebrow, but before she could protest, Ghost and Major Dawson already moving toward the secure compartmented information facility, or SCEF, a small, enclosed room shielded from any outside surveillance. The door slid shut with a muted hiss, leaving Emily and Stefan alone.
"What do you think is going on in there?" Stefan asked, his voice low.
"I don't know," Emily muttered, her arms crossed as she stared at the door. "But whatever it is, it can't be good." Minutes passed in silence. Then, the door to the SCEF slid open, and Major Dawson emerged, her face pale and tense. In her hands was a large, sealed plastic container, a bin of sorts, its contents obscured by the opaque lid. Without a word, she hurried down the ramp toward the void at the center of the Nexus Room, her boots echoing on the metallic floor. Emily's eyes followed her, curiosity and unease gnawing. She glanced at Stefan, who looked equally puzzled.
"What the hell is she doing?"
The fluid beneath the central plate began to stir, a low gurgling sound filling the room. Major Dawson entered the center, setting the bin down carefully. The liquid swirled faster now, its depths impossible to fathom. Then Ghost emerged from the SCEF, walking with purpose toward the terminal at the center of the room. He glanced briefly at the container but said nothing as he approached the computer. Major Dawson stood aside, allowing him to take her place at the console. Ghost inserted a plastic card into a slot on the terminal and began typing rapidly. The monitor flickered to life, a series of codes and commands flashing across the screen. Emily and Stefan watched in tense silence, unsure of what was happening but knowing it was important.
Shit. We lost it.
Chapter 22. Regrets. The Iron Guard encampment was quiet, the flicker of flames casting shadows against the walls of the makeshift tents. Jack sat at the edge of a small wooden table, a bowl of something vaguely resembling stew in front of him. Soldiers moved about, murmuring quietly, but Jack heard none of it. His mind was elsewhere, miles away, trapped in a different time.
"More. Would you like some more, Jack?"
A soldier asked, hovering nearby with a ladle poised over Jack's bowl. Jack blinked, looking up at the man as if he'd forgotten where he was. For a moment, the flickering light of the fire was replaced by the warm, golden glow of sunlight filtering through kitchen windows. Sure, he muttered, watching the ladle pour a second helping of the stew into his bowl. The gesture triggered something like a half-forgotten dream surfacing, unbidden. He had seen this before. Not here, not in the middle of an encampment, but at home. His old home. Their home. He wasn't in the present anymore. The clatter of the ladle against the metal jarred something loose in his memory, something delicate and distant, a memory of a place that no longer existed. Eloise. He could see her again, standing in their kitchen, a bright afternoon bathed in golden sunlight. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the air, and the light caught in her hair as she moved with effortless grace. Her humming, a tune he could never quite place, drifted through the room, as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. And there was Sarah, her little feet pattering across the hardwood, chasing imaginary friends and laughing in the way only a child could. Jack had leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching them both. Back then, he had thought those moments would last forever. How naive that seemed now. He had walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressing his face into the curve of her neck. She had laughed softly, the sound like music, and playfully swatted him away with her spoon. He remembered the warmth of her, the way she had made him feel that no matter what the world threw at them, they would be fine. They had believed, somehow, that time was on their side. But time had betrayed them. The headaches had come first. Small. Manageable. She brushed them off, too focused on Sarah and the day-to-day grind to let herself worry. Jack hadn't thought much of them either. After all, everyone got headaches. Then they became more frequent. Sharper. She stopped smiling as much, and the laughter that used to fill their home became less frequent, replaced by quiet, strained silences. When they finally went to the doctor, the word tumor fell into their lives like a hammer, shattering everything in its path. Inoperable. Aggressive. The words felt clinical, detached, but they hit with the force of a death sentence. Jack had watched her face as the doctor spoke, the color draining from her skin, the life draining from their future. He'd promised her they would fight it, that they'd find a way. He took time off work, rearranged their lives, tried to be present for every moment. But the disease marched on, indifferent to his efforts. Every day, a little more of Eloise slipped away. The day she couldn't pick Sarah up anymore broke him. She had sat on the couch, hands trembling, trying to explain to their little girl why Mommy couldn't hold her. Jack had watched from the doorway, helpless, as Sarah's eyes filled with confusion and fear. That night he'd held them both close, one arm around Eloise, the other around Sarah, as if he could protect them from the inevitable with sheer force of will. But love wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Jack's eyes refocused on the fire in front of him, the orange glow flickering across his face. His hands, calloused and hardened by years of service, rested uselessly in his lap. He had been a man trained to protect, to serve his country, to defend those he loved. But he hadn't been able to save her. He hadn't been able to stop the cancer from taking Eloise away, and now Sarah, his little girl, was gone too, snatched away by forces he barely understood. He couldn't let her go. Not like Eloise. He wouldn't survive losing Sarah too. The clink of metal snapped him back into the present. His bowl sat full, untouched. He pushed it away and stood, the heavy weight of his memories pressing down on him, harder with every step. The camp buzzed with the murmurs of soldiers, the soft clinking of gear being packed away, but it all felt distant, like an echo of a life he had once lived. He walked into the shadows beyond the fire, the night cold and silent around him. His mind lingered on Eloise, on Sarah, on the choices he had made that had led him here, to this war, this world, this moment. He had told himself that he could change things, that every action he took mattered, that there was still a chance to make it right. But was there? Was all of this the result of his own free will, or had it been determined long ago, set in motion by forces beyond his control? Had Eloise's death been inevitable, and Sarah's abduction another link in a chain he could never break? The thought gnawed at him, this question of whether he had ever truly had a choice, or if all of it had been destined from the start. And if that were true, if he was just a pawn in some larger game, then what was the point of any of it? Why keep fighting? He closed his eyes, feeling the cold night air against his skin, and for the first time in a long while, he let himself truly feel the weight of his loss. Eloise was gone. Sarah was slipping away. And Jack was a man who had always fought for control, only to realize that maybe he had none at all. He couldn't lose Sarah. Not like this. All of a sudden there was a bright white flash that lasted only a second and then back to black. Followed by the sound of thunder, a terrifying sound, the pressure wave vibrating through his chest. Jack immediately looked up, but there were no clouds, only stars. Soldiers throughout camp started cheering, some howling, others whistling. The mood was electrified ecstasy, with drums filtering through the night air from a distance. It has arrived.
About 12 hours later, in the OCC, President Holden's eyes flicked to the sleek holographic console on his desk. In the Echo, communication was near instantaneous, devices far beyond anything from his world, more precise than even his most advanced systems back home. But none of that mattered when you needed to breach the dimensions. That's where the issue lay. Between the overlap and the Echo, even a simple message, a voice note, required a transfer window, a fragile opening that could collapse at any moment. The twins had reluctantly agreed to send one disk across. A UAP in modern military speak, or if you are a boomer like Holden, also known as a UFO, a flying saucer. It's the only reliable way to stay undetected, the only reliable way to do this, but it'll take time to reach him, and time was something Holden could no longer afford. The thought gnawed at him, his source, the leak ghost. Holden couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The evidence had begun to point to Ghost's involvement, and yet Holden clenched his fists. It didn't add up. Ghost wasn't reckless. He wouldn't leave such an obvious trail unless he wanted to be found. Holden stood from his desk, pacing the polished floors of his quarters. His excuse of being in recovery was wearing thin. Back in the overlap, whispers of his absence would be gaining traction. Soon he'd lose the upper hand, and once that happened, it would be impossible to wrestle back control. He knew what had to be done. He had to cross back to the overlap, temporarily, just long enough to confront Ghost and unravel the truth from this tangled mess. Holden steeled himself. It wouldn't be long before the disk arrived, but if Ghost was as dangerous as he suspected, waiting for hard data would only deepen the mystery. He needed answers, and he needed them in person. The twins had been resistant, as usual. Persuading them to allow the disk had been difficult enough. Dunay in particular had narrowed her eyes at him during their last encounter, her skepticism palpable.
A transfer, Holden, she'd asked. You think it's wise with what's at stake?
It's the only way to resolve this cleanly, Holden had said, hiding the urgency in his voice. We need the Odin transfer package.
You need something more than data. Daniel's voice had been cool, assessing. Or you wouldn't be this desperate.
Holden didn't answer. Instead, he had simply held their gaze until they relented. A disk would be sent, but Holden knew the real solution wasn't on that disk. It lay in the overlap with Ghost. Later that evening, Holden stood out on the lawn off to the side of the OCC. He waited for about 10 minutes, as directed, but nothing happened. Then he saw it. A faint blue light in the distance. It grew larger at an unexpected rate. Soon he could discern numerous individual lights grouped close together. It grew closer still. The ship arrived in an unimaginable way. The size and bulk of the round disc-shaped object, about 30 meters across, was unscientific. The normal assumptions about weight and inertia didn't seem to apply. It stopped on a dime right in front of him. It descended slowly with an eerie turquoise glow pulsing through various vents. This was a visceral experience like no other. The air thickened, pulling at his skin. His vision blurred, and for a moment, Holden felt the world around him flicker, the sensation of being between two realities, a disorienting overlap of light and shadow. Then, with a sudden snap, it all settled. Holden opened his eyes. Cheyenne Mountain loomed, the air in the overlap crisper, harsher than the echoes. Holden strode through the base, his steps quickening as he approached Node 3. Tabasco had done well, keeping Ghost, Emily, and Stefan held in separate quarters, their movements tightly controlled. The interrogations had already begun. As he entered the command center, Tabasco approached, his face unreadable beneath the dim lights.
"Everything in place, sir," he said quietly. "But it's Ghost we need to focus on. He's the key."
Holden nodded. "And he knows we're closing in. That's why I'm here." They made their way through the facility. It was time to confront Ghost directly. If Holden was going to piece together what really happened, he couldn't rely on audio files and data packets alone. Ghost would give him the truth or Holden would drag it out of him. In one of the private interrogation rooms, Emily sat in silence, the pale light casting shadows across her face. She had been through several rounds of questioning already, but had given little away. Tabasco's report on her was clinical, precise, but Holden knew her involvement went deeper than she let on. Then there was Stefan. The young man was unraveling fast. His stoic demeanor was a mask for the doubt boiling beneath the surface. Holden would deal with him soon, but first Ghost. The interrogation room was cold, harsh lights bearing down from above. Ghost sat in the center, his hands resting casually on the table, expression unreadable. Holden stepped into the room, the door sealing behind him. "You've been quiet," Holden said, his voice low.
Ghost didn't move, didn't even flinch. "You'll have your answers, Holden. Just not the ones you want."
Holden removed a digital voice recorder from his inside jacket pocket.
Ghost tilted his head slightly. "This should be interesting."
"Yes, interesting. We finally managed to crack the encryption on the audio from the assassination attempt. You want to hear some of it?" He pressed play.
"Do it. Drive off the bridge." "You think you've saved him, Jack. This is far from over. And your daughter? Well, let's just say, didn't work out well for her."
"Sounds to me like you have some explaining to do, no?" Chapter 23. Why Babies Cry. Waterboarding was illegal. But then again, so was treason. The coldness of the sterile room was intentional. Holden leaned on the metal table, visibly irritated, his jaw clenched in frustration. Major Dawson had briefed him earlier, but Holden still struggled to piece it all together. "An orb, Dawson. Why am I just hearing about this now?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. Major Dawson stood firm, her voice calm but serious.
"Sir, I informed you as soon as we confirmed the object was physical. Ghost told me the orb was critical. He said it was necessary to ensure the survival of the species."
Holden shot Ghost a look that could kill. Survival of the species? This was beyond treason. "And you didn't think to tell me he was planning to send it to the Iron Guard." Dawson's face tensed, a flicker of self-doubt appearing briefly before she hardened again.
"I didn't know, sir. I was told it was meant for our side. For the preservation of the overlap." Her eyes darted to Ghost. He never mentioned the Iron Guard.
Holden stood still for a moment, staring daggers at Ghost. Finally, he turned his full attention on him, his voice low and simmering. "You sent it to the enemy. Why?" Ghost's calm expression never wavered. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms.
"As I told your Major, this isn't about sides. You keep thinking this is some political game, Holden. The orb is something far greater than you can comprehend. What you call an enemy has a better understanding of what's at stake than your puppet government ever will."
Holden's fists clenched on the table. Political game? Ghost was playing with fire. Ghost's smirk grew wider, his voice lowering to an almost conspiratorial whisper.
"Nothing is new. Everything that will exist already exists. No new stuff, new people, new thoughts. It's all old matter, old atoms and quarks that have existed in some form or another since the beginning. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred."
Holden's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to feeling out of his depth, but something about Ghost's words unsettled him. There was something bigger here, something he wasn't seeing. What are you talking about?
Ghost chuckled lightly. Every day, new people come into the world. It's not like you are replacing the dead. No, 250,000 new people come into the world. 250,000 new people are deposited on this planet every day, without their consent. Thrust into existence, into a life of having to struggle for survival, struggle to extend the inevitable out of fear of what death might be like. Those souls were at peace. They were in a place where there is no want or need. Brought into a world of only needs wants. Why? Because society needs to build new things. Tech companies need a market to sell to. Buildings need to be built. Fortunes need to be made. The truth is that those souls never chose this existence. Babies cry when they enter the world because they wake up in a horrible world of survival leading to eventual death. The overlap has been greedy and the echo suffers because of it.
Holden's confusion deepened, the pieces still not fitting together in his mind.
The overlap's population has exploded to over 8 billion people. Where do you think they all come from, Holden? Why do you think there are so many wars going on all the time? People instinctively want to cull the herd. That's why in developed countries the birth rates have plummeted. The herd knows that making more people is inherently evil.
You're saying that declining birth rates, the political divide, the wokeness are all signs. I don't get it. You say the echo suffers because of us?
Dawson's eyes flicked toward Holden, then back to Ghost. She had heard these arguments before. Ghost had alluded to them when she interrogated him earlier. But now, hearing it all come together, it made more sense. Ghost wasn't just playing a game. He believed what he was saying. You told me it was necessary for survival, but you never explained how. Her voice was firm, but there was a curiosity there now, something she hadn't fully grasped earlier.
Ghost nodded, as if appreciating her recognition. You think the Iron Guard is your enemy, but you don't even understand what you are. The orb is meant to end the suffering. The Iron Guard understands that.
Holden's frustration was mounting, but Ghost's words hung in the air like a dark cloud. You expect me to believe that people just know their lives are nothing but suffering?
Ghost's smile softened, becoming almost pitying. Not consciously, no. Subconsciously. Absolutely.
Holden shot a glance at Dawson, as if expecting her to challenge Ghost's bizarre reasoning. But Dawson was silent, considering the implications. And you think a stone orb will change that?
No, quite the opposite. It will give them the tools to understand what they are doing. The true cost of living. They will have the tools to change that.
And what about the girl? What's her role in all of?
A sudden explosion rocked the facility, the floor beneath them shuddering violently. Alarms blared, and the harsh red light of emergency signals flooded the room.
Sir, there is an unscheduled transfer coming through Node 3. The Nexus room is under attack. Sir.
Holden's gaze shot to Ghost, but the man was already on his feet, his composure unnervingly calm amidst the chaos. Don't let him get away. Lock this down now.
But Ghost simply smiled, stepping away from the table as the door slid open. I told you, Holden, you're not in control. You never were.
In the confusion, Ghost moved with ease, slipping past the guards who had stormed into the room. Holden lunged forward, but it was too late. Ghost had already vanished into the shadows. As the alarms continued to sound, Holden stood frozen in the chaos, his mind reeling. For the first time, Holden felt the cracks forming in his once unwavering sense of control. Ghost had escaped, and with him went the last hope of understanding the true scope of what was unfolding. The Iron Guard now had the orb, and Holden knew, deep down, that the balance of power was shifting. But what haunted him most was the fear that Ghost might be right. What have I missed? What am I not seeing? As Ghost disappeared into the chaos of the breach, Holden realized that the fragile world he thought he controlled was about to unravel, and the consequences would be far beyond what he could imagine.
Echoes of life. The chamber was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed gently against the skin. Sarah stood in its center, her fingers brushing the cool, carved stone walls. This place felt different from the rest of the echo, a subtle hum in the air, as though the room itself was breathing, alive with something unseen. Dune and Daniel stood on either side of her, their presence familiar yet always slightly unsettling. They were alike, yet different. like reflections cast in imperfect glass. Dunay's sharp gaze seemed to pierce through the dim light, while Daniel's softer features betrayed a hint of curiosity. Dunay broke the silence first, her voice measured, almost a whisper.
You sense it, don't you? The pull between this place and the overlap.
Sarah nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was supposed to be sensing. There was something here, something beneath the surface that tugged at her thoughts, but it remained just out of reach.
Danielle stepped forward, her tone gentler than her sister's, but still carrying an air of quiet certainty.
This room holds the balance, Sarah. It is where we feel the connection between our world and theirs.
The connection?
Sarah asked, her eyes drifting toward the orb that floated above them. It was faintly luminous, its glow steady and soft, like the pulse of something just waking from a long sleep.
Dunay nodded. Yes, the bond that keeps our worlds linked. Nothing is created from nothing, Sarah. Every life in the overlap has its cost.
What kind of cost? Sarah's voice was quiet, almost hesitant.
Daniel exchanged a glance with her sister before answering. A life for a life. That is the way it has always been. When someone is born in the overlap, someone here must pass.
Sarah's breath caught. She had heard fragments of this before, but never so plainly. So, every birth there means a death here.
Dunay's eyes didn't leave the orb. Yes, it is a rule of balance. Energy, life. They cannot simply be created. They are exchanged.
Sarah felt the weight of the words settle over her, but the full impact didn't yet hit her. It was too abstract, too distant. But why? Why does it have to be that way?
Danielle stepped closer to the orb, her gaze thoughtful. It isn't a matter of fairness or choice. It is simply the law of existence. Nothing is gained without something being lost.
The room seemed to hum a little louder, as though it agreed. Sarah frowned, trying to piece it together.
But that means the echo is shrinking and dying, isn't it?
Dunay's lips tightened slightly, her usual sharpness softening. Over time, yes. The overlap grows while we diminish. Slowly, imperceptibly.
Sarah wanted to ask more, to press harder, but something held her back. Perhaps it was the quiet resignation in their voices, or the strange calmness of the room itself. And there's no way to stop it.
Danielle gave her a gentle, almost sad smile. Not everything is fixed, Sarah. But some things are. The balance, the exchange, these are fundamental.
The orb pulsed again, drawing Sarah's attention. In its glow, she could almost see something shapes, faint images flickering like shadows, a figure being born, another fading into darkness. She took one last look at the orb, its soft glow filling her vision. The balance between the worlds was fragile, she realized, delicate, like glass, and she somehow was part of that. But how?
That answer, she suspected, would come soon enough.
Miss Sarah, would you like to see something truly heartbreaking? He motioned for her to come over.
I think so.
This is the register. It shows the name of every person that ever was, and the name of the person on either side that passed on to give them life. And in the middle of this stream of names oozing by, the true golden ratio.
The image, a floating hologram seemingly hovering, above a large case-bound book open centerfold, showed a steady stream of names whizzing up, the one on the left proceeding noticeably faster.
Every day 385,000 people are born, 150,000 pass away. That means that approximately 235,000 more people are born on Earth than died. Every day, day after day. You know how insane that is. It has been like this for a long, long time.
Sarah couldn't possibly fathom what that actually meant.
She watched in astonishment, the names moving past in a manner that caused a sense of urgency. The scale of it, the number of people appearing in the overlap every second was bewildering. And to think, they all come from somewhere. Life appearing in the overlap at a rate that seemed impossible to maintain even for a minute, but yet. Sarah stood staring, fixated on the image of scrolling names, long after the twins, and eventually even the steward left.
Chapter 25. Hemelankar. The air held a light whistle of wind through the barren trees. The bright flash and thunderous roar from 2 nights prior had faded into an uneasy calm. The relic had arrived, a dormant beacon of immense power, its potential waiting to be tapped. Over the last 48 hours, Jack had been privy to many new ideas. Much of it remained in obscurity, perhaps too far removed from any context. The strangeness of this place, while also being familiar to him, remained a challenge. It was, however, very clear that the Iron Guard has been looking forward to a specific event for a very, very long time. A critical moment in the future when the celestial bodies of the Echo align precisely. Occurring only once every 80 years, the alignment lasts for 13 days. They call it Hemelankar. The rare cosmic alignment fast approaching, the narrow window of opportunity starting tomorrow. The Iron Guard camp buzzed with frenetic activity. Soldiers moved with purpose, their preparations meticulous. It was apparent that they were planning large-scale military operations. Jack felt uneasy, almost as if he should not be allowed to see this.
Bismarck, a towering figure of resolve, surveyed the scene from the edge of the camp. The time for action was at hand, but a crucial task remained before he could proceed with his plans.
Jack entered a large LED-lit tent, a command structure lined with digital displays covering the walls. He had been summoned by the leader, reasons unknown. The tension was palpable. Jack had been drawn into a world of conflict and secrecy, far removed from his original mission to rescue his daughter. Now he stood at a critical juncture. There was an undercurrent of urgency.
The Hemelankar starts tomorrow. We are prepared but not ready. If we miss this window, the war will be fought by our great-grandchildren, but that assumes a lot. Chances are that war will never be fought at all. To stem the tide, the relic must be activated. It must be activated to ensure our very survival.
Jack's brow furrowed. What does that mean? Hey man, no disrespect. I can see you're doing your whole thing, but I kinda just want to get my daughter and go home.
I'm sorry, but that's not in your future, Jack. Let me explain why you are even breathing at the moment. The relic can only be triggered by someone who does not have a corresponding death in the Echo. Bismarck explained, his eyes locking onto Jack's with a piercing intensity. This condition is unique and seldom met. The person we need is not me, not Darlo, not Andy over there, or the president or Sally in sales. Bismarck's words fell like daggers, piercing. You are only here because of her, not the other way round. Get it? We can't miss this opportunity. Bismarck's expression grew solemn. If we do, another 80 years of imbalance will persist. The fate of both worlds hinges on this moment. The Hemelankar's alignment is our only chance to restore equilibrium.
Before Jack could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. A figure emerged from the shadows. The weight of the reunion was evident, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and resolve. They embraced firmly.
This is Wilhelm, second son of Don Hajar, sixth in line to the legitimate throne, Bismarck said proudly. My brother.
I was a whisper, but now I am a scream. I was unsure, now I am certain. I am home at last. Heard there were some issues, with the exception. Have you located her yet?
Bismarck nodded, his demeanor a blend of determination and introspection. We've awaited this alignment for decades. Its significance is not lost on us. We must ensure that the relic's activation is precisely timed.
But do you have her?
Jack observed the interaction with a growing sense of urgency. The alignment was more than a cosmic event. It was a critical opportunity that required careful coordination. The importance of their mission was becoming clearer, though many details remained veiled in mystery. As Bismarck and Ghost continued their discussion, Jack's thoughts turned to the task ahead. He understood that the only way they will allow him to get anywhere near Sarah was if he was on board, fully. Jack was left to grapple with the implications of the Hemelankar, the relic's activation, and the mysterious conditions surrounding it. He somehow understood that if the Echo runs dry without anyone left to pass on, the overlap will eventually also go to dust as no new children will be born, or capable of being born. Both fragile worlds will surely die. Jack met Bismarck's gaze with newfound resolve. I'll get Sarah to the camp. I will make sure the relic is activated.
Bismarck placed a firm hand on Jack's shoulder. Remember, Jack, the exception doesn't know her own strength. Not yet.
As Jack prepared to leave, he glanced at the relic, its presence a potent symbol of hope and power. The coming days would be pivotal. The Hemelankar had set the stage for a critical moment in history. Jack, Bismarck, and Ghost each had their roles to play in this unfolding drama. Jack knew the relic's power, the delicate balance of the worlds, and the future of both dimensions rested on the decisions made during the Hemelankar.
Chapter 26. It's been a while. Holden leaned back in his chair, the sharp overhead lights casting a cold glow on the papers in front of him. A single question pounded in his mind. How had they been so blind for so long? Ghost had once been one of their most valuable assets, a high-level source whose intelligence had led to countless victories and foiled operations against the Iron Guard. His information had been nothing short of impeccable, and for decades, no one had thought to question his motives. Now, the truth was staring Holden in the face. Ghost had been playing them all along. "72 years, Holden muttered, flipping through the timeline again. He's been a registered source for 72 years, and no one thought to question how someone could operate that long.
Emily, seated across the room, glanced at Stefan. They had heard whispers about Ghost before, rumors that had circled in the highest echelons of intelligence agencies, but no one had ever dared to doubt the authenticity of his information, not until now. It never added up. Emily said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Explain why no one ever asked the obvious question. Who is he? How did he stay in the shadows this long? While rare, the government had a handful of sources going back to the Cold War. But this is an entire generation before that. He must be at least 90 years old by now, right?
Not just who. Stefan added, leaning forward in his chair, but why? Why now? Why did he stay loyal for all these decades, only to turn on us at this point?
Holden's expression darkened. He was never loyal. He's been feeding us just enough truth to stay valuable to keep his cover intact. A traitor from the start, but one smart enough to play both sides. For years, Ghost had slipped through the cracks, acting as the perfect source, valuable, reliable, and utterly enigmatic. His intel had been so good that entire operations had been built around it, countless missions won or lost by the weight of the information he provided. But now, with hindsight, it was clear that Ghost's true loyalty had never been to them, it had always been to the Iron Guard. The Iron Guard, Holden said softly, a bitter edge to his voice. They've had a mole in the heart of our operations for longer than anyone realized, and they used him to keep us from ever seeing the full picture. The thought sent a chill through the room. Ghost wasn't just an ordinary defector or turncoat. He had been entrenched in their ranks, feeding them selective information for decades. Every time they thought they were gaining ground, Ghost had likely been manipulating the situation, guiding events to suit his own hidden agenda.
Do we even know who he really is? Stefan asked, glancing at Holden. I mean, the name Ghost, it's a code name, but for all we know, he could have been anyone, or no one.
Holden sighed. That's the thing. We don't know. Every attempt to trace his identity has led to dead ends. But now, with this recent intel about his connection to the Iron Guard, we're starting to piece things together. He's not just a mole. He's one of them.
Emily's eyes widened. You think he's part of the Guard?
Not just part of it, Holden replied, his tone dark. He's tied to them. Closely. Maybe he's been orchestrating more of their operations than we ever realized. For all we know, he could be one of their commanders. The realization hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ghost, the source they had trusted for over 70 years, had likely been an active player in the very organization they had been fighting against, and all this time he had stayed a step ahead, manipulating them, playing them like pawns in a much larger game.
Emily frowned, a thought occurring to her. But how does that explain his longevity? 72 years is a long time for anyone, even with enhancements. There's something else at play here.
Holden nodded, his mind racing through the possibilities. We don't have the full picture yet, but I suspect whatever is happening in the Echo, whatever this connection between the overlap and the Echo really is, it has something to do with it. He's survived this long for a reason, and it's not just science keeping him alive. We need to find out what happened back in 1945. I mean, what really happened there. The twins made a point of it when I met them. After 80 years, what are we not seeing?
Stefan's voice dropped to a whisper. You think it might be a cover-up? Sir, what if what we all grew up to believe was wrong? History is told by the victors after all.
I don't know what to think. We're dealing with something much bigger than we ever realized, Holden said, his voice quiet but resolute. Ghost isn't just a traitor. He's part of something ancient, something that spans both worlds. And apparently I don't have bloody access. That stops right now.
A moment of silence passed between them as they processed the enormity of it all. The war between the Overlap and the Iron Guard wasn't just a matter of politics or territory. It was something deeper. A battle that had likely been raging for centuries, longer than any of them could comprehend.
We need to figure out what his endgame is, Holden continued, and fast. The longer we're in the dark, the more time he has to strike.
Emily stood, the weight of the revelation pressing heavily on her. We'll do whatever it takes to stop him.
Holden met her gaze, still wary, still unsure of their full loyalty. But for now, they were all that he had. And with Ghost still out there pulling the strings, he couldn't afford to ignore any allies, no matter how thin the thread of trust was between them. We move forward, Holden said, standing as well. You two stay on Ghost. We need every scrap of intel we can get. I'll head to Washington to get military approval, but I'll keep an open line. Whatever you find out about him, you tell me first. They nodded in agreement, though the air between them remained thick with suspicion. As they left the room, Holden stared at the screens once more, his mind swirling with questions. Ghost had been an asset for 72 years, far too long for anyone not to notice. But now it was clear he wasn't just a source, he was a force. And whatever he was planning, Holden knew it was only the beginning.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East.
Chapter 27. A Fragile Balance. In the vast chamber of the Echo's central citadel, the twins sat in deep contemplation, their gazes fixed upon the central hearth where pale blue flames danced softly. Above them, the high windows let in beams of twilight from the waning sun, casting oblong shadows against the polished stone floor. The air was heavy with the knowledge they had uncovered, knowledge they had long feared, but could no longer ignore. Sarah was the exception.
It's confirmed, whispered Dune, her voice barely more than a breath. She is born without causing sorrow.
Daniel, seated beside her sister, ran her hands through her blonde hair. The Hemelanker. And the exception, we have both. For the first time in generations.
The steward, a lanky figure whose body belied the sharpness of his mind, stood silently nearby, clutching the closed register which revealed Sarah's unique nature and sealed the child's fate.
Everything aligns as it was foretold. The moment approaches.
But the confirmation carried no joy. It was a weight, one they had carried for far too long, and with it came the memories of their last attempt, and more specifically their failure. The price had been unbearable.
The campaign. When we last unleashed the relic, Bismarck began the destruction city by city, as he had always planned, but after 2 strikes, the relic lost. Her voice faltered. We thought it was over. But the overlap found it, Daniel said bitterly, her eyes narrowing as she stared into the flames. The relic fell into their hands, and they've been experimenting ever since.
They've learned much, Dune added, but without the Hemelanker, and without an exception to focus its power, they've only scratched the surface of what it can do.
The overlap claimed its activation as a deliberate act. We know that they activated it several times thereafter, learning from every test.
They've come close. The steward interjected, his voice thin but resolute. Too close.
The relic had been the source of power for millennia, its origins stretching far beyond any legend they could remember. It had always been tied to the cosmic alignment, the Hemelanker, and it required a rare soul, the exception, to channel it. That Bismarck had used it for destruction was a grim reminder of its capacity for devastation, and now it seemed inevitable that the campaign would begin again.
But this time, Daniel said, her voice shaking slightly, the Iron Guard will not be so easily deterred. They will not stop at a few 100,000. They can't. It is an unfortunate reality that no one can avoid.
Which is why we can't afford to wait, Dune concluded. We must act now.
Silence fell between the sisters. The steward, though patient, could feel the hesitation in the air. The memory of Bismarck's last campaign was still fresh in their minds. The systematic destruction of cities, their collapse, their people torn from existence, had scarred both the Echo and the overlap. But they had survived. Barely.
Bismarck will push too far again, Daniel whispered. He always does.
He will destroy more than he can afford, Dune agreed. Too much of the overlap, and the Echo collapses as well. We will all die if he does not rein himself in.
The flames flickered as the weight of their dilemma grew. They could not afford to allow Bismarck unchecked access to the relic, but they needed him. Needed his campaign to restore the balance, however ruthless it may be. There was no other way. At least not one they had found. Not yet. Suddenly the door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. his face flushed with the urgency of his message.
Your Majesties, I must inform you that news has reached us. The messenger began, breathless. Jack Harper is searching for Sarah. He's on his way.
Both twins turned sharply toward him. Jack, they had been expecting this, but not so soon.
And what about Bismarck? Johnny asked.
The messenger hesitated.
Yes, we believe Bismarck has been in contact with him. That is true. He may hold influence over her father. That is possible.
For a moment, the room felt colder. Daniel stood and crossed to the windows, staring out into the distance.
If Bismarck is using Jack, he's moving faster than we thought.
He'll push for the exception. He will want to finish what he started in 1945. Dunay's voice carried the weight of inevitable violence. But we can't let him. Not without boundaries.
Daniel turned back from the window, her expression hardening. We'll have to bring them both here. We need to set the limits of what is acceptable. Bismarck must understand the balance, or we will all suffer for it.
The steward nodded slowly. You are proposing an alliance, then?
Not an alliance, Dunay said, shaking her head. A meeting. One where Bismarck will know that while we need him, we will not let him go too far.
The balance must be restored, Daniel echoed, but not through reckless destruction. Bismarck has always believed in the sword, but he can become blind.
The steward's gaze shifted from one twin to the other, and Jack.
We'll allow him to see Sarah, Dunay said after a pause, but only if Bismarck comes as well. If they're going to move forward, it must be under our conditions.
Danielle returned to her sister's side, the two standing together, unified in their decision.
We will meet them here, she said. Jack may have his reunion, but only if Bismarck agrees to sit at our table.
And what if Bismarck refuses? The steward asked.
Dunay and Daniel exchanged glances, their resolve clear.
He won't. He knows as well as we do that without the Himmel anchor. And, Sarah, there is no future for either world. He will come.
Let him think he's in control, Danielle added, her voice colder now. But we hold the power. We always have.
The flames flickered again. As if sensing the tension in the room, the messenger bowed and left, leaving the twins and their steward to the silence of their thoughts.
Bismarck may begin his campaign anew, Dunay whispered, as though speaking to herself, but this time we will make sure he doesn't go too far.
A delicate balance awakens in the silence.